Mike, I'll start with you. You coached for a long time, phenomenal career as a head coach. What's it like now on the other side, coaching coaches?
Yeah.
How's that impacting your heart?
Well, I think lots of times, I don't know about, as I went through my career, I thought that this is the only thing I could do is coach. I just thought that I'm in a box and this is who I am and that's all I can do. And so I think as I transitioned towards the end of my career saying, what's next? What's next? I'm not going to just sit back and sit in a chair and watch ESPN. Sorry. But so, the transition became, if I can invest in coaches, then those coaches can invest in their players. And so it's been wonderful for me to be able to be around coaches. I'm still in the game. Mm-hmm. It's just in a different way. So I'm still doing what I'm doing, just a little bit different. Don't have the player relationships that we all love, but I sure have the coach relationships that are special.
Coach Clayton, I'll ask you the same thing. How's the nation of coaches impacted your heart, impacted your life?
For me, it was a little bit different. I always knew I would not always coach, but I was planning for a career in athletic administration, so I was an associate athletic director for 16 years, and I thought that's what I would do. But then when it was over, and I talked to Tommy, I was talking actually to Tommy and a couple other sports ministries, Nation of Coaches fit me because of the idea of the master coach. Mm-hmm. I played for a master coach, just like he played for a master coach. And so it was easy for me to want to come to Nations of Coaches and coach coaches and be a pastor to coaches because of the impact that my coach had on me. And I thought I could multiply my impact. Instead of just impacting 12 players that I'm coaching, if I can impact coaches who are impacting 12 players, then it multiplies. And understanding what coaches go through, I coached on not every level. I didn't coach high school, junior college, or Division III, but I coached Division II, low Division I, mid Division I, high Division. I knew what coaches went through. And I knew what Mike said, that most coaches think that's the only thing they can do. And so I thought it was a chance to encourage them, to have an impact on players, and to know that they're smart. If you can coach and lead a basketball program, you can do a lot of different things because you have a lot of different skills.
Yeah.
I love what Ritchie said a minute ago, that when he was in New Mexico, he found himself, he had moved over to Isolation Island. And man, the enemy loves that. He loves us isolated. And we're coming out of a time over the last 12 or 13, 14 months that we've had a lot of isolation that we didn't ask for. And I'll start with Coach, the importance, Ritchie, of not being isolated as a man. Expand on that again for a minute for me and then right on down the line. Or the danger you see in being isolated.
Yeah, John Gordon refers to them as the 5 Ds. The enemy tries to divide, distract, discourage, distort the truth, or create doubt. And in those Ds, to me, that distraction is a big one, but also the distortion when he tries to make you feel like you're going through it alone, or that you might be the only person that struggles with a certain thing, or just don't feel like you measure up. And if he can trap you in that, and again, it's really what's your take on reality? For Hiro Noto, his take on reality is that the war wasn't over. And if we have the same take on reality where our barometer is the world system of success, then we really don't have a chance. So for me, I need encouragement, and Tommy Kyle's been incredible in my life. That dude's been a saint. Dale Clayton he's like my Bible encyclopedia. If I need to ask him about, hey, where does it say this? He can give it to you. Like, test him, ask him a question, just come up with a random scripture when we go Q&A. I guarantee you he'll tell you. So I have men in my life that help shape create a lens for me of what my take on reality should really be.
Mike, what about isolation?
Yeah, I think for coaches, it becomes very easy to isolate yourself if things aren't going well. We're pretty out there in the public and out there with the crowd when we're having a good year, things are going well, but our circles get real small when things aren't going well as a player, as a coach, or as an individual. And so that isolates us. Then next thing you know, we start thinking about all the other things, and like Satan wants to isolate us, wants to think that we're only ones, or we're not measuring up. And I think that's something we have to be careful about. We've got to have a group of men around us, and that's why I see so many young coaches now have built a team around them of other young coaches that they can go to and say, here's what, I need to be transparent here. I need to be more vulnerable here. I'm feeling alone, and I need to reach out and find guys that are like-minded. And so that's my encouragement for everybody. When you start losing, you start really tightening up and holding everything in. You need to find those guys and say, hey, did you ever feel this way? And then they can share, yeah, I feel that way right now. And now you have more people that are in your foxhole.
Coach Clayton?
Well, I learned something about myself during COVID. I've always considered myself to be pretty strong and not really needing people the way some people say they do, even though I'm an introvert at heart. But I actually went through a time where I was just really struggling. And I found out that I felt like I was starting to go into some depression. And I'd never really said that to anyone. And so one morning I woke up and I told my wife, I said, I hate to say this, but I think I'm getting depressed. And I talked to my daughter and I told her, I said, I think I'm getting depressed. That was hard for me to say or to even hear myself say it because I thought there was a weakness in me. And so I called my second pastor, Roger Adams. I said, hey, Roger, man, I think I may be getting a little depressed. And he kind of talked to me about some things. And the problem was I missed people. Now, I had my wife, my grandchildren. That's why we moved here, my daughter, and she'll tell me whatever she thinks I need to say, whether I want to hear it or not. And so I can always say something to her. But what I didn't realize was how much I missed you all. Because you all for 40 years have been a major part of my life. Mm-hmm. And I had to come to the realization that my struggle was not being around coaches, the people I was pouring into every day. And we were talking on the phone, but that's not the same as looking someone in the face. And so I learned that God had created me in such a way that I needed those relationships, but there were special relationships built with guys, some of you guys, over 40 years. And we weren't having those conversations because so many guys were struggling to a degree they've never struggled before. Even though that's part of what I do, it changed the relationship a little bit. There wasn't as much laughter and that kind of thing that my wife says, no one gets you to laugh like coaches. I didn't have that. And so for me, it created a little struggle. And I had to get serious about working through that.
It's probably the last year I will drive our daughter to school because she turned 16 in the fall. But every day that I've driven her, at least once a week, probably, I will ask her, "Who's your five?" Because she's known enough now to know what I'm asking is, who's your five people that are closest to you right now outside of me and your mom? Who are those five voices? Who are you listening to? Who's your counsel? Who you're surrounding yourself with? Because I want her to learn at that age, because I learned it too late, not too late, later than I should have, the importance of, I have five guys right now. Like if you can ask me at any time, call me, Jimmy, who's your five? I'll be able to tell you, these are the five guys that I go to when I need prayer. I could call them right now and say, hey, I need you to pray right now. I know they're going to do it. Or I can call them with a concern, with whatever it is. I know they're going to pray. I know they're going to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. There's so much wisdom in what those guys are saying about not letting the enemy get you isolated, feeling like you're going at it all alone. I said earlier this morning, the enemy is so talented at dragging us away from God, and part of that is, and his plan is to get us isolated. So I encourage you to take to heart what those guys have said. Coach, I'll start with you this time on this end. Let's work our way back this way. I want you to finish the sentence. Jesus means...
It's going to sound trite, but to me, it's life. How I live life, how I view life, to me, he's life. And that was hard for me because it's hard for me to do it in one word. But I'll choose the word life. I wanted to choose the word truth, but I'll choose the word life because there's no part of life that he's not involved in. So that's the word I would use.
Coach?
Well, since he said life and then he said truth, well, I'm going to steal his answer. Truth.
Yeah.
I think that in today's world, down deep, there's a lot of us, a lot of people, a lot of our players are looking for truth. It's just so vague, so much going on, the truth. And, so I think Jesus means truth to me.
Richie?
Ditto. No. I mean, those were great answers. I think grace. Jesus means grace. There's a song that I listen to over and over again. The first part of it says, all my life I've been carried by grace. And I think, again, that's the enemy's attempt to, when we mess up or when we feel like we don't measure up, the enemy would want to disqualify us. And I know that God's grace is sufficient and that his word is true. And I get another day because his mercies are new every morning.
Last question I have, and then I'm going to open it up to the room because I don't know if we're on time or not. There's 2 clocks up there. I've lost track of what's happening. But Richie, let me ask you this. When you see other people in your profession, this is going to relate to a lot of us in this room, that aren't doing it the right way. They're doing it the wrong way. They're cheating. They're cheating on their wife. They're cheating on who they are, but they are winning at a high level. How do you handle that?
Goes back to my scoreboard. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm really good friends with Tony Bennett, who won a national championship. Scott Drew won a national championship this year. And I know God gave both of those men that success because he felt like they would glorify him from the platform they were given. And there's great coaches out there. I can't judge how one person does it or how another chooses to live his life. I'm responsible for my choices. And I think what you said in your talk about forgiveness is really important because I think it's easy for us as coaches to compare. Like, you guys don't know, but these 2 gentlemen on my left are phenomenal. They're great coaches. But you may not even heard their name before because they haven't been on the national stage. So I just think God created us all differently for a different purpose. And if we can live out of that purpose, we don't have to worry about how we measure up compared to this coach or that coach or this guy's won the coach of the year or the league champion. Let's just be responsible for what he's granted us the privilege to do, to steward, to shepherd the young men and women he's entrusted us with.
All right, you have a chance to talk to the hearts of 3 phenomenal men up here. I think you can see that. You can feel their vibe. I can in the room. So I'll let you guys pass the mic around again for a few minutes here.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important. I was at a Christian college. It made it easier, Rich, but I wanted to be as vulnerable with my players that I possibly could so they could see the good days, the bad days, the tough times, the real times. I think sometimes we candy coat, we put on a false or fake. Today's kids are the best ever of sensing false and fake. They smell it better than anybody. And so I think lots of times as coaches, when we're dealing with something and we're not vulnerable, they sense, wait, coach is not real with us right now. Why isn't he real? Doesn't he trust us? He wants us to trust them, but why doesn't he do that with us all the time? And so I think the key thing to success in coaching is being vulnerable. Be real vulnerable. My players have seen me cry. Not because of a loss, just because of situation. My players, we always told our players, there's 2 things you always have to do, hug and love. You have to say, I love you, and hug. And because a lot of guys never heard that or never got hugged. So I think that's been a key of crossing the line of being vulnerable as a coach.
Yeah, Rich, I would add, Coach, you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, Rich, I struggled with that early, and a guy helped me with was a guy named Tubby Smith. Some of you may have heard from him. Tubby used to meet with his players 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes every week, each player, where they could not talk about anything related to basketball. And the purpose of that was for them to get to know him. And I tried it, and it really helped me, because when you sit there and you're talking to players and you take basketball and you take it out of the conversation, to what do you talk about? You talk about them and their family, they talk about me and my family. And so that's what helped me. And so they got to know the real me. And so for me, it was a game changer to do that.
Yeah, same thing. My administrative assistant puts player meetings in my schedule, puts it on my phone, so I'm accountable for them. And I don't go 14 days without meeting with a player individually. We had 16 on our roster this year, so I try not to do more than one a day. And if I have to, sometimes I'll double up or triple up. And really, I try not to talk about basketball. If they want to talk about their minutes, we can, because I want them to have a safe place. But oftentimes those conversations will get real and something will come out. Maybe they're struggling with an addiction or habitual sin or behavior. And it's a chance for me to say, hey, I know what that looks like. Or I know someone else who maybe I help shed some light on that struggle. So, and that just opens the door to conversation. I also think saying you're sorry. Like, I got a little convicted when one coach asked about kicking a basketball in practice. I mean, that happened a long time ago. Like, anyway, and then just, hey, I lost my cool. I don't want you guys to react. I want you to respond, because a response is generated from this accumulation of habits that you've accrued, and that's my hope that I can model for them.
It goes back to the question that was asked before, and that's what are you dealing with? Because I'm thinking of truth and life, that's where everything starts for me. And I know that might not be everyone, that's just personal where it starts for me. And so that's what decision was based on. The hardest decisions for me in coaching were not really the player decisions, it was where I was going to coach. Because I had that drive to be at the highest level, and I had been there, and I recruited first-round draft choice, and I'd done all of that. But I'm never going to say this in the public, but there was a fear I had. And the fear was that I would get to the point where I am now, and I would be all alone. I didn't want to get to be 70 years old, having coached, and not have a family. So when I thought about decisions, the ultimate thing for me was, how will this impact my family? And I turned down some really great jobs in some great places because I just felt like I'm just not sure it was good for my family. Because I always tried to function with the end in mind. And the end was to get to this point in my life, have a wife that I've been with for 50 years, have my daughters, my grandchildren. That's where I wanted to be at this point in life. So that impacted decisions I made coaching, especially in terms of where I coach, because there were some levels, and you guys know this, man, it's tough at that level, and I've been there. And it can cause you to make some really tough decisions. So I took some of those decisions off the table by finding a safe place. And I stayed there as a head coach for 23 years because it was a safe place. I could set the culture and everything else that was really important to me. And I'll say this in closing, but here's what I really had to do. I had to get to the point where what everybody else thought didn't matter. Because I got that question a lot. Why did you leave and go to Division II? I can't tell you how many times I got that question. And I said, well, for me, this is where I think God wants me to be so that in the long run I could be here. Now, Ritchie will be here in the long run, and he's been at that high level. And he's handled himself real well, and some other guys have. For me, there was really a little bit of a fear that I didn't trust myself. I just didn't trust myself. And I was asked, why did you think you went to that level for so long? And I said, because God knew me better than I knew myself, and that was a way to protect me.
Brian, it's Brian, right? I'm gonna all right. Oh, Ryan. Okay, my bad. I'm going to take a crack at that. I love what Coach said, and Jimmy said it's his 5. I think if you have counsel, godly counsel in your life, men that you really trust, I think you should share with them what your heart is. But one of the things that has really helped me, and I heard a great quote, this guy said, emotions are great passengers, but they're horrible drivers. And if you're running from something instead of running to something, you're doing it to fill a hole. And look, I did that the first part of my career. I was a head coach at 29, and Division I head coach at 29. I was not ready. I was way too young. I was emotionally immature. And, you know, God sovereignly protected me, but I was running from job to job to job because I was running from something. So I would tell you, men, if you've got people in your life that you really trust, share with them why you're considering going here. And for all you assistants out there, or even head coaches that are aspiring to go up, man, I know it sounds contradictory, but wait on the Lord and He will renew your strength. Nobody, that's what I mean by the right take on reality. Nobody really believes that, do they? How would waiting renew your strength? Man, because there's a trust that gets developed in that classroom that allows you to know, well, wait. God's in control of this. I mean, after all, the word says, whatever door He opens, no man can shut, and whatever door He shuts, no man can open. So that'd be my take on it, Rod. Sorry I messed up your name. We don't play y'all next year, so you won't take it out on me.
We're not playing you guys.
Yeah.
I
I know better, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that coaches struggle with, I struggled with in the North, is being focused in the now rather than the next. I don't know if anybody else deals with this, but I think as men and as coaches, we have the double-edged sword of getting focused so much on the next that as soon as the game gets over, we don't enjoy that. We don't really enjoy the process and seize the moment and celebrate that. We're already on to the next scout, the next game, the next season, the next recruit. Got to have this, got to have this. And you know, if you get caught in that trap, and there was so many years where I got caught in that trap, I was always in the next. What's the next championship? What's the next? And we do not allow ourselves to enjoy the moment. And sometimes the noise of getting caught in that trap can really put you on a spiral that you create a monster. You create this monster inside that you never get fulfilled, and that's culture, our culture. And I think it's mostly in the basketball culture that you get caught in that trap. So the noise I had to focus in is just enjoy today. Just enjoy today and not worry about the next.
Elijah Cuffey is one of our players. His brother Jason passed away earlier last year, and he was a fireman, and he tragically went home to be with the Lord at, I think he was pronounced dead at 2:53 a.m. At 5:01, my phone rang. If you're a coach and you have a cell phone, if your phone rings at 5:01, it's usually never a good thing. And I could hear in his mom's voice, his mom, Sarah, called, and she was obviously shook. And they asked, we've called Elijah 12 times and we can't get a hold of him. Can you go get him? And Elijah and his brother were like that. So I called one of our GAs who lived with Elijah. He woke up and he woke him up, and I told him what had happened, but I said, don't tell Elijah what happened, just tell him he's got to call home. And then Elijah, this is a testament to that kid. About 13 minutes later, he called me and said, hey, Coach, do you mind if I leave and go home to be with my family? I said, no. Do you need us to drive you? No, sir. Do you? So we asked him what he needed. He said nothing. He went with his girlfriend. They drove to Polka, 5 hours away. And they went through that grieving process. The funeral was 5 days later, and if you've ever known a service individual to pass away, if they do it on duty, they have a corporate deal for him, a tribute, if you will. And it was in Charleston, West Virginia, where he was stationed. And there's probably 400 people there. And our guys, we told them, hey, we're going to take a bus up. It's COVID, so you got to be careful with social distancing, so you don't have to go. Every single player, every single coach, every single manager wanted to go. They drove 5 hours without stopping to eat. We had food on the bus. They sat for 2 hours in the service. We drove right back immediately after, didn't stop. There wasn't one complaint. Not one person got on their cell phone. It was a testament to the kind of young people that we had in our family. And his parents later said, that was the greatest display of love that we had seen for our son in however long we can remember. So in answer to your question, it's fabulous what God's created in our family. And it's a credit to the players that they've really owned being a part of something bigger than themselves. Thank you for the question, Jason.
You know, the thing that I just sent a letter out to a lot of coaches that now that I'm in Nation of Coaches, I think that those that come from a faith-based college make a mistake thinking that your players are going to tell you everything. They're not. And after 30 years of coaching, I really made a mistake of thinking that we loved our players so much, they cared so much that they would just come to me with anything that was on their mind. But they're not, especially at a Christian school, they're going to think, well, I'm going to get kicked out of school if I tell coach this. I'm going to let him down. He's going to take playing time away from me. And that's what they think. And so they're not being real. And again, we're going back to the whole thing of being transparent. That's where a character coach comes in and just picks up the pieces and able to work with that player. And the coach can say, hey, you can go to that character coach and spend time with him. And then the character coach is trained in a way that if it's something that I needed to know, then that's good. But many times the character coach deals with it, and it's a safe place for the player to be involved in. And so I think that's been a key learning thing for me, is how important a character coach is at a state school or a Christian school. They still need to have one.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yes.
You almost turned it over.
I've had a lot of turnovers. You got a lot of steals.
Well, a lesser athlete wouldn't have been able to catch it like I did. But
Yeah.
Tad, I would say that if you imagine trust as a layer and safety as the foundation, where there is no trust, there is no safety. And if players don't feel safe, especially I learned this in marriage counseling, if a woman doesn't feel safe because you violated her trust, you got no chance. So being able to authentically pursue trust on a regular, daily, committed basis is so important. And I think it's true with our players, because if they can't trust you, they won't feel safe enough to tell you what they're struggling with. But I think we have a responsibility as the stewards in their life to, hey, man, you can trust me with this. And if the consequences are expulsion at your institution, man, isn't it better for that to be the outcome, as opposed to someone who loses a marriage or loses a career or loses something else over something in their past? So I feel like at our university, well, I know this to be true, and we have a phenomenal character coach. So I agree with Mike. If you don't have that, you're missing out. At our university, I think there'd be a level of grace extended to that individual and some counseling to support what's happened in the past. Obviously, as long as it's not felony related or whatever, but even if it were, I still think we would have an adjudication process there that could maybe help promote some healing. But if you never get to that, it's just the mask again, and be a mile wide and an inch deep, to me, isn't the way. I just think it's our responsibility to try and get rooted.
That's where the culture come in. I'm so old that we didn't have character coaches. And the thing that we were able to do was to start building trust with players and let that accumulate so that there comes a point in time, players talk to each other. And players know they're going to either tell them you can trust coach or you can't. And it's going to be based on their experience with you. And so if you can start trying to lay that foundation, and it's difficult, but then after you've been there for a while, Pat, players will talk to each other and they'll say, hey, you can tell coach. Or you can go talk to coach. Well, how do you know? Because I've done it. Or how do you know? Because this is what we've seen. So I think that relationship with players become very significant in accomplishing what you're talking about. Because it's one thing for one player to tell his teammate it's okay, than for even the coach to say it's okay. Because they're with each other all the time. And they've got that sense of, man, we're all for each other, we're in this together. You wouldn't tell me that if you didn't believe it. So if you say I can trust coach, then I'm gonna go try to trust it. That's been my experience. It was easier when it came from a player than when it just came from me.
So I think the question that he asked, and man, I appreciate your boldness to ask it. I would, on my right is Jimmy Dykes. If you ever listen to him in a game, you learn as a coach. 3 guys that I really learned from that do. Rick Macheritz, who's deceased now, when he was on a game, I would take notes. Like, he was elite. Jimmy Dykes, I think Seth Greenberg really knows it. There's others, I'm sure, but I'm especially paying attention. To my far left is Dale Clayton. I've sat in the room with him before and just asked or listened, hey man, how do I do this? And you struggle with what all of us struggle with, our take on reality. Hiro Noto, the war was over. It was over. But because of the circumstances around him, he didn't believe it. And man, where do you start? You find someone. We have a saying in our program. Family isn't just represented in your blood relative, but family is anyone that loves you unconditionally. Find you a man that loves you unconditionally, because that is where he'll tell you the truth. And if he'll speak truth in your life, man, hold on to him so tight, because he can really shape your take on reality. That's where I've started, and that's where I stay. I don't have 5. I'm not as popular as Jimmy, not as good looking, not as fit. By the way, you have Adidas shoes, Under Armour shirt.
Yeah.
I got to send you some Liberty gear.
And Lulu pants, Lululemon pants. And a Nike belt. They got the whole thing covered.
The film doesn't lie, but you haven't been to all the venues, because I've never seen you at one of our games. Anyway. I'm hoping, though, praying that one day. And that would be my answer.
I'd say the same thing to show you the consistency. There are, my college coach, man, he's 85. And I call him today just like I was still playing for him. Because if he told me something, it was it.
Yeah.
It was right. And even now, I'll still do that. And Jimmy said 5, and I read his book, and I went back because all that was important to me, and I had some of those guys. But I moved, and so God gave me a different guy, and the guy named now is Roger Adams. And he's sitting right there. And Roger will tell you, when I found out I had prostate cancer, he was one of the first people I called. Because I knew whatever he said to me was going to be true. whether I wanted to hear it or not. And actually, I remember what he told me. He said, man, that's great. He said, you've been living your life for this. Now, you all don't know what that means. What that means is the worst thing you can happen is die, but you've been living your life so you're prepared to die, so why are you worried about the cancer? That's what he was saying to me. And I knew what he was saying, and you know what it did? It calmed me. It really did. It calmed me. Where do you start? You start with the word those guys gave you. You start with the truth. It's the only place to start. Any place else you start, you'll never get where you want to be. So you got to start with the truth. That's the foundation for everything we do. As a coach, there's a lot that we hear that's not true. And we've talked about some of them. Sometimes we accuse a guy of cheating. That guy doesn't cheat. They just recruit hard, they work hard, they do a good job. But it sounds better if I say that because it gives me a way out. So we'll say things like that. To me, you find the truth and you start there because it's the foundation that never changes. Never. For me as a believer, the Bible's the truth. That's where it starts. When the question's asked, what do I say about guys that's cheating? I said I wouldn't do this, but so I lied. But I think of the scripture. I think of the scripture that says, my grandmother taught me this: fret not yourself against evildoers or the workers of iniquity. Don't do that, for their days will be what? Their days will be cut off. Don't worry about those people out there and what they're doing. I'm responsible for my life in relationship with Christ. No one else. No one else. So that's where I start. I start with the truth because I don't know any other place to start. And believe it or not, guys, the person that taught me to do that was my college coach. That's why we pour into you guys.
Yep.
The person that taught this guy was his college coach. You heard them talk about that before. Think about it. You being the guy that teaches someone else. And that impact lasts for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because they fill your heart with the truth. That's the only place, Randy, that I know you can start. If there's a better place, I don't know where it is.
Coach, I would add to that. There's been a lot of stuff thrown at this group in here today, like you articulated, and I have found in my life that when I tried to make any type of a change in my life based upon Jimmy Dykes' will, his toughness, his dedication, his discipline, after about 6 or 7 days, it wasn't happening. And the only time I've seen real change in my life in any area is when I've submitted that area to God and say, God, I can't do this on my own. I need you to change me and change my heart in this area from the inside out. That's the only place I know that true, lasting change comes about.
That's good.
Yeah.
I've been listening what you said, Coach McKay, in regards to a couple of things, but the one that I think about is hero. And I listened to what you talked about when you talked about trust and safety. If you don't have the trust, you can't have the safety, that safety floor. And I thought about what Coach just said a few moments ago. And then we talked about, that safety factor that the players have to be able to come to you and speak. And Hero had this, and all I could think about was Hero didn't surrender because his colonel said, I'll come back to get you. That, based on the story you were sharing. Mm-hmm. He said, if you come back, I'll surrender. He said, it doesn't matter how long it takes, I'll come back to get you. I think a lot of times what we find ourselves, especially when we're dealing with young people, is they found themselves with that colonel who told them that they will come back to get them one day, and they never come back. It took a college student or someone, you said, that went and found that colonel, the original colonel with the original orders that brought them 29 years later before Hero was able to find safety. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people find themselves in is that I'm still waiting on Dad to come get me. I'm still waiting on somebody to come get me. You talked about those places where they needed that special interaction with their fathers. And I think that's one of the things that we're struggling with is you find a lot of people that have been promised something. I'll be back. Or I promise I'll never let you go. I'm always here for you. You know, and I think about the idol in Penn State, you know, that monument said to that great coach was torn down because of somebody that he trusted and thought it was safe, and then all of the other things didn't happen. And now, you know, there'll be people that will never know who this man was based upon that safety level was stripped out. And so, how do you deal with that part? I'll be back. I have a stepson. I'm a step-up dad. And the one thing, my stepson loves me, and he always makes sure that his son say bye-bye to Papa. And he won't even call his dad because he's one of those people who would sit on the porch waiting on his dad to come by. And he never did. I'll be there to pick you up, son. And he wouldn't come. And so now we find these kids that you're coaching and touching, and they have that hero syndrome in them. So maybe you can deal with that. I know it took a little bit longer, but.
Yeah, thank you for your question. For the sake of time, the hero Onoto story, like that's a fascinating story. And the offshoot, there's a story in itself on the discipline and dedication that my man had, 29 years. Mm-hmm. And he surrendered in the same uniform that he went on the island to. So he didn't have the right take on reality, but there's another story in that. I would answer your question though, the Bible says to put your hope in the Lord. And he's promised us, and this is where I think our take on reality has to be, like throughout the Bible, man, Jesus inverted it. He confounded the wise. He told Peter to walk on water. He said, wait on the Lord and renew your strength. He said, it's better for me to go away because I'm going to send you a helper. So what I've learned, because man will let us down. If I asked to show of hands, or maybe even better yet, if my sin or our sins were, hey, roll the last 25 years of my life unedited up there, right? Wouldn't take me long to leave the room. So whether it's Joe Paterno or Ravi Zacharias or Carl Lentz, like I'm not ever trying to condemn someone else for their sin, but I'm also not putting my faith and my hope in man. Oh yeah, I'll use man to help me go in the journey, but my hope is going to be put in the Lord. And if you stay in that lane, I know he'll be faithful. That's who he is. So man, thank you for being a step-up dad. I love that term, a step-up dad. I had 5 stepdads. They were not step-ups. So they weren't invested in me or my mom. So I had to do some forgiveness for that realm, but it sounds like what you're doing, God's going to honor. So I appreciate that.